Now, I'm not saying that I'm some kind of business mogul, but I have previously launched, built up and sold a clothing brand, which I believe allowed me to build the skill sets that I now have taken through to the more recent business launches that I've done. And that's allowed me to be perhaps even more successful. And I've been told that I should share the journey of building this business more often. So today I thought I would walk you through the untold story of Shore Fitness Clothing. So first of all, let's roll the clocks back to 2015. I'm a 23-year-old, handsome-ish young man who is ambitious. I've just bought my first property that we lived in as a home, and I worked full-time. I would say I got sucked into working within the system, which is not a bad thing if you enjoy it. But for me, I worked within the system just as a means to pay bills and continue working life. At this point in time, whilst I had definitely just achieved one of my initial life goals, which was purchasing a property, being a homeowner, I now started to turn my mind to thinking about what is the next 10 or 20 years of my life gonna look like. I was doing sales roles within the property industry, and whilst I loved property and knew that it was something I wanted to be part of, I was starting to think I didn't want to work for someone else, but of course didn't know how that might turn out to look within the future. So it was at this point in time that I thought, for the first time ever, that I need to create a business. I want to create a life where I work for myself, I have my own freedom, and I therefore also have more control over my own income. Now, my first thoughts, having been an estate agent, having understood and seen the lives that developers and investors were living, I thought, this is what I want to do. I love property, I love being an estate agent, but I'm not getting what I want out of life, and therefore I should become an investor. Of course, that's all good saying it, but at the time I didn't have enough money. Whilst I was earning a good income from that job, I did not have enough to go out and start a property business. So that led me to thinking about creating some form of cash flow. So at this point in time, I also had an incredible interest in the gym. I had a real passion for it. I thought I was going to be, the next Ronnie Coleman. Well, not really, but I had visions of putting on muscle, but that never happened either. But I also had a real drive for creating some kind of business. I feel like I've always been slightly entrepreneurial, just never fully released it at this point. And I saw the kind of upcoming gym market, or the gym clothing market, where it was switching from, stringer vests over to more stylish, high quality gym clothing. Going to the gym was becoming more about appearance and also the fashion that comes along with it. And at this point was when Shore Fitness was born. When I set up the business Shore Fitness, I chose the name Shore Fitness because I lived in the south, near the shore, near the coast, and lived actually within an area called Shoreham by Sea. I thought, what a great opportunity to capitalize on the local areas which are really into their fitness, have some really good gyms, and call it Shore Fitness, which therefore could be developed into Shore clothing with a really strong standout brand name, logo. I would grow it from the south and then try and develop it throughout the UK, and then maybe some point take it across the waters to other countries. So the initial start to the business is, of course, create a logo. I think it's super important with a clothing brand that there has to be some kind of font or logo that's very, very recognizable, and then take that through into the clothing to make the clothing very, very recognizable. I started by getting the logo created and then moved quickly onto the clothing itself. I did a total of 4 launches with the company. The first one was 3 t-shirts. The second one was more accessories. It was like hoodies, caps, gym bag. Third launch was women's leggings, which was a big market to get into. And then the fourth one was unisex jumpers, vests, and just a few more accessories to add on top of that. So I started with the 3 t-shirts, and at this point, I potentially made the first mistake, which I'll come on to talk about, but I really wanted to double down on the quality. Rather than going down the route of finding a UK merch provider, I wanted to go across the waters, I wanted to go abroad, and I wanted to go to a manufacturer that could help me produce a higher quantity and also a better quality. So rather than taking a generic product and just labeling it with Shore Fitness, I wanted unique clothing that no one else had created, and at a high quality. So at this point, I started talking to Turkish manufacturers. I made 300 units of the t-shirts, 300 units of the vests. Now, for anyone with experience in the clothing industry, you will at this point think, for the first launch,
300 units?
Yes, it was crazy. I wanted to do 100 to 200 units, but I simply couldn't find anyone that would do a lower quantity. Otherwise, it wasn't beneficial enough for them. And of course, I needed to go to them in order to get the quality, the type of product that I wanted. So I ordered those, we got those in, and as I say, as I went on to grow the business, I then did 3 further launches. So at this point, I wanted to focus on the growth of the business, in which I was going to focus on 3 marketing channels in particular. And I would say it probably took me up until about the 6-month mark to start thinking about these, because at the beginning, I really wanted to nail the foundations. I wanted to make sure that the product was right, the quality was right, customer service was really good. Obviously, logistics was on point. I wanted to make sure that any of the advertising, the click-throughs, any social media was just already in place, already functioning well, perhaps systemized, although I didn't really know what that meant at the time, so that when I started to double down and focus on the marketing, everything else had a solid foundation. So the 3 marketing channels that I mentioned are the following. Number 1 was distribution. I wanted to get my product out there, because although I was advertising it, had my website, I knew that the shortcomings of a new business was effectively people knowing about it. So I thought, if I can get this product into local businesses, then that would benefit me to have eyeballs on it. So whether that's within local shops, local gyms, if someone walked in and they saw it, whether they knew the brand or not, there was an opportunity there for them to buy it. That would bring revenue into the business, but it would also bring brand awareness. So I started with local small businesses, small gyms. I didn't go for the corporates because it's harder to find the right powers, the right people within those companies to have that conversation with. I wanted easy wins, so I went to local independents, sportswear shops, shoe shops. I went to gyms and had an agreement with them, kind of like a no sell, no fee kind of thing, where the clothing was in there. If we made a sale, they got a cut of it, and of course I got a cut as well. And then everyone benefits, win-win. So that was the first marketing channel. The second one was events. Again, I didn't have a large budget here, didn't have lots of money coming into the business, and therefore going to the pinnacle of sports events like Body Power would have cost me, 8,000 plus. Buying the stand, making the stand, getting all the marketing materials, getting people to work there, getting enough products in. Instead, what I did was, again, focus on the south, focus on growing brand awareness down here, and I started to do local events. The overall setup, I think to start with, was about £1,000. And once I had that set up, it was, branded like a marquee kind of gazebo thing and everything lined up. It cost me about £1,000, but I could rinse and repeat that at multiple different events. And that's exactly what I did. We did charity events, we did sports events. We were just there to be part of it and to get the name out there for people to recognize Shore Fitness, and once again have the option to buy it if it was there in front of them. And then last but not least was Facebook ads. Whilst we didn't have a large amount of cash spare, as I've already mentioned, at the end of the month, once all the products that we'd sold, all the revenues come in, once all the expenses have gone out, any profit left over was then reinvested into Facebook advertising in order to, once again, create brand awareness, but also generate more sales. One thing we did have from ordering a large amount of units at the beginning was lots of units, lots of stock and inventory. Inventory? Is it inventory or inventory? Don't know. We had lots of stock and lots of inventory, but we didn't have enough cash. So any profit that we made, straight back into ads to try and generate more sales, more cash coming into the business that we could then take forward into future months, which did always seem to be quite successful, and therefore I continued to do that month on month to see as much of the result as we could. Now, I said that was the last thing, but there is one final thing I just wanted to mention, which I believe helped fuel the growth of the business, which was after launch number 1, I was moving into launch number 2, which was the accessories. I had a good friend of mine, George, who was also a model for the business. He was the initial model and had helped with the photographs. He'd kind of seen what I was doing, seen the launch of it, really bought into it, and could see the vision of where this brand was going. He offered to and wanted to purchase a portion of the company in order to buy into it, basically. So I sold him 25% of the business and allowed him to invest his money in for a 25% share and stake in the business. And although I remained the sole decision maker, George was there as a bit of a silent partner for that kind of thing, but was very much present for helping with events that we had going on, all of the photo shoots we had going on, any running around that needed to be done for the business. George was there. George was very helpful and very supportive. And therefore I do contribute that to the growth of the business in order to have a cash injection, but also the assistance of someone else helping me so it didn't always fall on me. Now, I think it's important to share the revenue of a business, I guess, for you guys to be able to gauge the size of the business, because this wasn't a tiny company, this wasn't a huge company. In fact, it's probably on the smaller scale of things, as this was my first ever business launch, and I think this really did pave the way for what I've been able to go on and build more recently. At the time, I would say probably our biggest revenue month was about 4,000. We'd probably be in that, £2,000 to £3,000 revenue mark, and then either the Black Fridays or some of the events that we ran would allow us to push up to more like £4,000 a month. Although that sounds fairly good for a clothing brand, because you have to remember products of clothing are only, £20, £30 a piece maximum. So in order to generate thousands of pounds per month, you have to sell an awful lot of product, which is harder than you think. So what I would say is that although that sounds like a fair amount of money for a clothing brand, of course, that really is only a kind of 10 or 15% of that is a profit margin, because everything is just reinvested into purchasing products, the logistics, any of these events, any of the social media, paying for influencers, for models, for photo shoots, you name it, we had to pay for it. And therefore, by the end of the month, the actual remaining profit was probably 10 to 15%. And even then, that would always get reinvested into some form of advertising, usually Facebook ads. So I'd say at this point in the video, it's a great opportunity to talk to you about what went wrong in the business and what went well in the business, or what went right. If we start with what went wrong, because that's perhaps where we can learn the most mistakes from what I've done here, I would probably start with the amount of units. Obviously, I mentioned that one earlier, and it's probably at this point I should say to you that any product-based business, you have to be very careful with the amount of products you order, because it absorbs all your cash, and then all of a sudden you're sitting on unwanted inventory if you don't sell it quick enough. So I went out and ordered 300 of each of these t-shirts and vests, when really I could have probably done with between 1 to 200 of them. And whilst when I did eventually sell out, I went on to reorder them because they were a popular product, overall, I would say that I would have definitely reduced the amount that I'd ordered in the outset. Now, of course, that would have meant changing supplier. That might have even meant going down the route of getting ready-made products and then just adding my logo to them. And that's probably what I would say. If you were starting a clothing business from today, rather than going straight into a bespoke product at high unit quantities, I would perhaps try and buy them in a much lower quantity and take a product that's already been made, already been tried and tested, and add your logo. Build up the brand around that, build up the customer experience around that as much as you can, and then use the money that you earn to then go on to make your own bespoke products, the higher quality products, and also the higher unit product. I think another thing that I did, perhaps not wrong, but perhaps I would have changed, is I definitely spent too much money on events. And perhaps I should have spent that marketing money, that marketing budget, on more Facebook ads. You see, I saw a very good return from Facebook ads. I almost didn't see what was in front of me at the time, which was a brilliant opportunity. I'm running ads, between 2016, 2017, 2018, which is really the prime of Facebook ads. And I could see that when I was spending money, I'd get some back. I'd spend money, sell some product, get some back. And perhaps I should have doubled down on that more. Whereas what I was very focused on as well was these in-person events. I wanted to be an in-person brand. I wanted us to be seen out there in the market, adding value to people's lives other than just a piece of clothing. Now, obviously the benefit of that is of what I've just said, but the downside of that is perhaps we could have produced more revenue through making sales, and then in the big picture could have taken that revenue and then done more and bigger events. So perhaps I was thinking a little bit too long-term for the brand and short-term in terms of cash. So that's what went wrong, but perhaps it wasn't really anything that went wrong. They're just lessons you learn along the way. And then what went right, I would say there's so many things that did go right with this brand. First of all, I would say is probably the most important one is the people that I was able to work with and leverage. I say leverage in a very good manner. I always tried to create a win-win where people had fun, they got products, or they got payment, and therefore were part of this brand and this movement that they could feel really happy and I guess respected by wearing this brand and showing it off and training in it and just have a good overall feeling. Now I'd say because of that, I managed to bring people together. And although there was a massive amount of people that were in that journey with me, I have to make special note to Usman, to Dom, to Nettie, to Bryce, to Colin, to George, to Michelle, because these were all people that were so pivotal and such a support to the brand and were so loyal to it when they didn't have to be, that it helped it grow, helped it really establish itself within the few years that I was running it, I guess. So on top of that, I would say, the other positives was, building that good reputation in the south of England. I learned a phenomenal amount of business skills from this and how to manage money. I also learned how to manage people in the sense of finding people to leverage them, as I say, in a mutually beneficial way, which can be transferred to many different businesses and perhaps is the core of any business. And then last but not least, I would say that I learned how to use social media. Within a short space of time of running and owning this brand, I would say I managed to grow an Instagram page of 15,000 plus followers within, I think, just 18 months, which was amazing to learn how to do that, see how it worked and do that through a brand, and then be able to take that through into my next season as an entrepreneur, as a property investor, and go, how can I innovate and be different in the social media world of property? Bring the clock forward to 2018, and at this point the business has kind of been in play for about 2.5 years. So in 2015 the idea was created and everything was lined up. Launched it at the beginning of 2016 and then ran the business for, as I say, just over 2 and a bit years. At this point, I had to really sit down and review the future of what I thought this business may or may not be. As I've already alluded to at several points during this video, cash flow is very difficult in a startup business, particularly one that is product focused. And this was the real constraint to the business. Every time we wanted to do a new event, it obviously drained our bank balance. Every time I wanted to launch a new product, it did the same thing. We couldn't do it, or it would completely drain the bank balance. And therefore, growing the business became very difficult. We lived very hand to mouth, and every time we wanted to do a launch, we'd have to really plan it far in advance to make sure we had enough cash to buy the product to then obviously sell it and then re-inject that back into the business. So in 2018, after reviewing the business and what we could do to take this to the next level, the answer really was investment. It was increasing the amount of products we had, the amount of units we had, and then the amount of reach that we had in terms of like Facebook advertising and more events. And the only answer for that was to bring money into the business. So at this point, the decision was, do we get an investor or investment funds or a bank loan, or do we part ways with the business? Now that isn't something that I took lightly or wanted to do in the outset, but I really took my brain and my focus back to, why did I start this business? Was it to build a big machine to just do this forever, or was there another purpose? And the answer was, there was another purpose. The other purpose was property, and that this business, 2 and a bit years in, really wasn't helping me fulfill the other purpose. It hadn't allowed me the freedom to leave my own full-time job. It hadn't paid me enough money to be able to go and invest into property. In fact, if anything, it had drained my time to the point where I was just working full time or working on this business. And when you weigh up a business like that, the amount of outcome that you have in relation to the amount of cash or time you put into it, it can become very clear as to what you should do at the next step, or at least it did for me. So I made the tough decision to sell the business. Shutting it down simply wasn't an option because we'd managed to build such a brand up, such a reputation up within the small area that we were operating in, that I simply couldn't just shut it down and walk away from it. On top of that, we had stock, and it was definitely something that could be packaged up and sold. So at that point, I did put everything together, put the business together, the stock that it had, the last 2 years worth of numbers, and obviously being able to present those to a buyer, the revenue versus the profit, how much stock we had, where you could potentially take the business. I listed it on a business selling marketplace, and quite quickly had 3 buyers come along, all within quick succession of one another. They all presented their offers, obviously asked for certain due diligence, but being that it was still a small business, there wasn't a huge due diligence process. So unfortunately, I cannot disclose the sale price of that business, as that was part of the condition of the sale. But what I can tell you is that it wasn't life-changing money, sadly. And the weeks and the months following the sale of the business weren't, a rush of endorphins and parties and, going crazy. In fact, it was a combination of a relief and a drop in stress levels. A weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but equally also a very sad time where something that you've created, you've launched from the ground, it's become your baby, has now just gone. And it's been sold to a point where you can't get it back now. But I would say the benefit of being able to cut ties with it was then I was able to go, right, I have learned so much in this business. I have acquired so many skills. I now have a bit of money. Let's take this forward and let's double down on the next chapter, the next season of my life, which of course is property. So if you've made it to this point in the video, A, I appreciate you, and B, I've got 3 bits of advice for you that I want to leave with you before we part ways. The first piece of advice is to leverage people and use the benefits of leveraging people. I think it's Grant Cardone in the Undercover Billionaire series that says that he would far prefer to take all of the time that he has and put that into building the network and relationships with people and using them to leverage their time, their network, their skills, rather than trading his time for money. So remember that with any business, people are at the heart. Number 2, always launch a business that you have some kind of interest or passion in. Not everyone will agree with that bit of advice, because you can definitely go and launch a business that you have no interest in and you can make it highly successful. I'm sure loads of people have. However, business is a rocky road and it's a roller coaster, and there will be days where you hate it, there will be days where they're incredibly stressful, and the only way to get through those and persist and make it to the other side, get to the gold at the end of the rainbow, is to continually get up every day and do what you need to do. And the only way to make that easier is if you have a passion, if you have an interest for it, and therefore it's no longer a question of should I get up and do it, it's I love what I do, I've just got to push through, I've just got to do it. So that's my second piece of advice. And then my final one is always reverse engineer your goal. Work back from where you need to get to, because if you are about to start and launch a business, that first year in business will be so different if you are aiming to get £1 million in revenue versus if you set out to get £100,000 in revenue. The way that you approach the start of that business and the products that you sell and the price point that you sell at, the customers you go after, everything will be so incredibly different depending on your end goal. If you launch a business and you don't know what your year 1 revenue goal is, or if you don't know what your decade goal is, or you don't know what your goal is to eventually sell or exit this business, how do you know how to efficiently launch it? How do you know how to efficiently grow it and what channels you should take the business down if you don't know where you're taking it to? So have that end goal, have that pinnacle that you're always trying to work towards, and then just reverse engineer the goal back year by year, work out what you have to do to achieve that goal. So that is the untold story of Shore Fitness. I appreciate everyone that was part of the journey of Shore Fitness, and I appreciate you for watching this video back. I hope it was useful. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.